Most people think explaining themselves creates understanding. In reality, it often creates the opposite. The more desperately someone tries to justify every decision, every mistake, every opinion, the less confident they appear. And people notice, not because they are judging the explanation itself, but because they are sensing something underneath it, a need for approval, a need to be believed, a need to control how others see you. The strange part is that over-explaining usually comes from good intentions. You don't want to be misunderstood. You want people to know your motives. You want to prevent conflict before it happens. So you keep talking, you add more details. You clarify one point, then another, until the explanation becomes bigger than the situation itself. And that's when respect quietly begins to disappear. Because respect is rarely built through endless justification. It's built through emotional certainty. People trust those who seem comfortable being misunderstood occasionally, not because they are arrogant, because they are not emotionally dependent on everyone's approval. In many workplaces, this dynamic plays out every day. A manager asks why a deadline was missed. One employee gives a concise explanation. Another launches into a 5-minute defense filled with context, reasons, and qualifications. Ironically, the second employee often appears less credible, not because they are lying, but because excessive explanation signals anxiety. And anxiety changes how people interpret your words. The conversation stops being about the situation. It becomes about your emotional reaction to the situation. That shift matters more than most people realize. Socially, people are constantly evaluating emotional stability. They pay attention to who remains composed under pressure, who can tolerate uncertainty, who can accept disagreement without immediately trying to repair it. Over-explaining often reveals an inability to tolerate those things. It communicates a hidden message. I need you to see me the way I see myself, and that message creates tension, because nobody likes feeling responsible for managing another person's self-image. The pattern usually begins much earlier in life. Some people grew up feeling constantly misunderstood. Others were criticized so often that they learned to defend themselves before anyone even attacked. Over time, explanation becomes a survival strategy. They anticipate judgment before it arrives. They answer accusations nobody has made. They justify decisions nobody questioned. What once protected them eventually starts damaging them. Because adulthood rewards a different skill, not perfect self-defense, emotional restraint, the ability to say enough and stop. This becomes especially important among competent adults. The more responsibility you carry, the less explanation people expect. A respected leader doesn't justify every decision. A respected professional doesn't argue every criticism. A respected person understands something many people never learn. Not every misunderstanding requires correction. Sometimes the need to explain comes from an uncomfortable truth. You are trying to manage perception. You are trying to control how others feel about you. And control is exhausting. Because perception can never be fully controlled. No matter how carefully you explain yourself, some people will still misunderstand. Some will still disagree. Some will still create stories about you that have nothing to do with reality. The emotionally mature person eventually accepts this. The over-explainer keeps fighting it. That fight slowly drains confidence. It creates a habit of constantly seeking reassurance from the outside world. And once people sense that dependence, the social dynamic changes. Approval becomes the currency. Respect becomes harder to earn, because respect is closely connected to self-trust. People are drawn toward those who appear grounded in their own judgment, not those who constantly ask others to validate it. This doesn't mean becoming cold. It doesn't mean refusing communication. It doesn't mean silence in every situation. Healthy explanation has a purpose. Over-explanation has a fear. That's the difference. One shares information, the other seeks emotional relief. And people can feel that distinction almost immediately. Sometimes the most powerful response is surprisingly short. A clear answer, a brief clarification, then silence. Not defensive silence, comfortable silence. The kind that communicates confidence without trying to prove confidence. Many adults spend years learning how to speak more. Eventually, some discover a different lesson, learning when to stop speaking. Because every extra sentence carries a cost. Every unnecessary justification reveals uncertainty. Every attempt to control perception gives away a little personal authority. The people who command the most respect are rarely the people who explain themselves the most. They understand that being misunderstood occasionally is part of being human. They understand that disagreement is not always rejection. They understand that self-respect begins where excessive self-defense ends. So the next time you feel the urge to explain every detail, every motive, every decision, pause for a moment. Ask yourself a difficult question. Are you providing clarity? Or are you asking for permission to be accepted? Because those are not the same thing. And the answer may reveal why some conversations leave you feeling drained, while others leave you feeling free. Respect often grows in the space where explanation ends, not because silence is powerful, but because self-trust is, and people can feel the difference.